Hello. So I am here in the ruins of a medieval castle to review this book, Devilland by Clare Jackson. Apparently, this castle was destroyed by Cromwell's troops in 1651. Okay, that was the point when I realised that filming in the rain and wind in the ruins of that castle was not a great idea. So I'm here in the comfort of my home to do this book review of Devilland by Clare Jackson. So, who is Clare Jackson? She is the senior tutor of Trinity Hall, Cambridge University. She's done the Stuart documentary that was aired fairly recently on the BBC. I'll put a link to some of the clips that are still available online to that because I think it's a really good entry point into this period. She also wrote the Charles II edition of the Penguin Monarchs series, which I talked about in my Stuart Britain book recommendation video. And Devilland recently won the Wolfson History Prize in 2022, and the judges said the following about this book. They said, "It's a masterpiece that will change our view of the 17th century, exciting and well written. It provides insight by looking at England through European eyes." So that's great, and I'm going to come back to that. I think that's a really good summary of this book. So Devilland, it's why is it called Devilland? Because this is the idea that England was almost like a failed state in the 17th century. That it was there were plots, assassinations, executions, conspiracy, complete breakdown of kind of government, all those things. And as the Wolfson judges put it there, it is really using kind of European sources, kind of the outsider view, looking into England and the political goings on. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the content, give a couple of brief quotes, and then talk about how generally, I found this and who might enjoy this and who it might be useful for, and then maybe any kind of slight criticisms I might have right at the end. But overall, I really enjoyed it, and I would strongly recommend it. So the book itself, the subtitle is England Under Siege, 1588 to 1688. Actually, it starts in 1587 with the execution of Mary Queen of Scots, and that's really important because Clare Jackson really eloquently explains how the execution of Mary Queen of Scots sets a precedent. Okay, so it sets a precedent that a monarch can be executed. So going on to the execution of Charles I in 1649, it wasn't the first time that a monarch had been executed in that way. So it wasn't completely unprecedented. Also, this event, the execution of Mary Queen of Scots, sparks the Spanish Armada. It then goes into detail about the Spanish Armada and talks about what happens there, the succession of James VI and first, and also talks about his son Henry, his eldest child, who didn't survive to see the throne. Obviously, Charles I comes next, but it talks about that succession, the issues with succession there. A couple of things that I picked up from this that I didn't really know much about was that the another attempted invasion by Spain in 1597 and a Spanish landing in Ireland in 1600. So often when you teach Spanish Armada, it's like, okay, that's it, 1588, Spanish Armada fails, end of story. But obviously that wasn't the case. This is something that continued. It also talks about James's attempts to unite England and Scotland at great length, which I thought was really interesting. Obviously, going on to the Gunpowder Plot and then the 30 Years' War. And then it talks about the event in 1623, which is really fascinating, of Charles and the Duke of Buckingham traveling to Spain to try and woo the Spanish Infanta, the Spanish princess, and just how kind of mad this idea was. So they just went to Spain in disguise and they kind of turned up and said, "We're here to try and arrange a marriage." And I'm just going to read a quote here that it says, Philip IV and his advisors were, however, not a little embarrassed by the surprise, which prompted urgent meetings of the Council of State. Since this event has no parallel in history, it was hard to know how to deal with it. So they just didn't know what to do. It's like, is this a kind of formal event? How should we deal with it? So there's, as it says here, there's splendid courtly and civic entertainments for its unexpected English visitors, and of course it didn't work out. That marriage didn't happen. So just fascinating insight there. And yeah, using the kind of Spanish sources, really interesting take on it. Then it goes into the reign of Charles I, but very much from a kind of looking at from a kind of within Europe. So what's going on? The Treaty of Susa with France in 1629, Treaty of Madrid with Spain in 1630, during the personal rule. So very much putting England within Europe. It's not just about England; it's England's place within Europe. And then just an example, and this the last quote that I'm going to read is example of how this is kind of using the kind of outsider view to tell the story of England in the 17th century. It gives a French pamphleteer's response to the execution of Charles I in 1649. And it says, as another French pamphleteer confirmed of England's political elite, this was not, of course, the first time they have exercised their cruelty on the sacred person of their kings, hinting at the execution of Mary, Queen of Scots. So very much using the outsider, European sources to illuminate what's going on here. And it does go beyond 1688, talks about the 1690s in the epilogue. And so right at the end, it also talks about how, at the start of this, it talks about Mary, Queen of Scots, and it ends with William and Mary. So that was quite a nice, ending to it. So I really enjoyed it. And something to say about it, just on a kind of practical level, it looks, especially the hardback, it looks massive. It looks like a huge book. But actually, it's only 512 pages. Well, it's still significant, but 512 pages with then kind of 160 pages of notes. So it is significant, but it's not quite the tome that it looks. It looks like it's kind of 800 pages, 700 pages, but it's actually, there's quite a significant amount of notes in there. I really thought this was a great book, and I thought it really did place England into that European context. It was a take on this period that I hadn't read anything like this before. It really illuminated this period for me in a different way. One thing I thought when I first started reading it is that it could potentially bridge the gap between the Elizabeth GCSE and the Stuart Britain A level. So if you're a GCSE student finishing Elizabeth and you're going to start A level and you're going to do the Stuarts, it could be something that you could read between. However, having read it, I wonder if it is the best place to start. I think if you haven't read a book about Stuart Britain, it might be better to start with something a little bit more accessible, maybe a little bit lighter, because it's a pretty hefty book, 512 pages, and although it is very illuminating, and I find it absolutely fascinating, perhaps some of those other books that I talked about in my other video, Stuart Britain book recommendations, which I'll link to below, might be a better place to start. But if you've read some of those, or if you've read something you feel like you know it, then I would strongly recommend it. And I thought it was just brilliantly written, excellently researched and resourced, and a fascinating kind of take on this period. So let me know if you've read it. I'd be really interested to hear what you have to say. Or if you've got any questions about this review or anything else about Stuart Britain, please let me know. Thanks for listening.